Hi guys, today we're going to be creating a really easy and fun pattern for making a cute winter hat like this with a pom-pom with our round knitting loom. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is your yarn. This is Bernat blanket yarn. The second thing you're going to need is a round knitting loom. This particular loom is the 36 peg Knifty Knitter brand loom. And this size loom is great if you're making a hat for a small to medium sized adult. If you're making a child size hat, you'll need a smaller loom. And if you're making a hat for someone who is larger, you think would need an extra large size loom, then you would need to buy a larger loom. You're also going to need a hook like this one, which normally will come with your round knitting loom. You're going to need a pair of scissors to cut up all those loose ends and finish your project. You're also going to need a ruler or a tape measure. You're also going to want to have a large yarn needle like this one, so you can sew in all of your loose yarn ends once you're done with your project. Finally, you're going to need some sort of cylindrical object to wrap your yarn around in order to make the pom-pom. And I chose this can, but you can also, if you need to, just wrap your yarn around your arm or your hand, and that works well for a lot of people as well. Okay, so now let's move on to actually making our hat. So the first thing we're going to do is take our loom and take our yarn, and we're going to take the end of the yarn like this, and the very first thing that you need to do is make a slip knot. So we're going to take our yarn like this, and then what we're going to do is first attach it to the very first peg of our loom. So what you're going to do is look for this knob and then attach your slip knot right to the first peg right after that knob, and then pull it tight. Next thing you're going to do is start wrapping your yarn around all of your pegs. So you're going to hold this end, this loose end, hold it like this, and then start wrapping. So to wrap, you're going to take your yarn and pull it starting with the inside of the loom and wrap it around like this. And you're going to hold it tight or else the yarn will fall off. And basically what you're going to do is you're just continue to wrap until your whole loom is wrapped. Okay, so now I've wrapped my yarn around every single peg on the loom, and right now I'm back to the last peg. So remember, this was the first peg right after this, the little nub, and then this is the last peg. So once we've wrapped it around, we're at the last peg. The next step is to push down all of the yarn, so we have room to put another wrapping of the yarn.
Yeah.
Okay. So after we've pushed down all the yarn, the next step is to wrap the yarn one more time around the loom. So we have 2 total rows. So we're going to start again on the first peg and wrap. And then do that one more time until we have all of the pegs wrapped. Now we have all of our yarn wrapped around the loom twice, so you can see that there is two layers of yarn, and the yarn is currently right after the last peg. So this is when we are going to use our pick to start knitting with the yarn. So remember to hold it tight, and basically what you're going to do is start with the very last peg, because this will hold the yarn in place. So what you're going to do is take your pick and then go under the bottom layer of yarn with the pick, and then move it up and over the top the top layer and atop the peg. So after you do that, then you can let go of the yarn because it'll be held in place with this loop. And then what you're going to want to do is do the same thing and go all the way around with the pick. And basically each time you're going to take the bottom layer, move it over the top layer, and just let it drop over the peg. So I'll show you this way. So it gets very easy once you get used to it. So basically you're just going to continue that process and go all the way around the loom. Okay, so now we've finished pulling each of the bottom loops over the top loop for the entire loom. And now once again, our yarn is in the very last loop, is on the very last peg, and we're ready to go for another once more around the loom. But remember, after we wrap each layer, you're going to have to push the yarn down like this, so you have room on the pegs to add another layer of yarn. So now that you've pushed all the yarn down on the loom, it's time to wrap the yarn one more time again. And then we're basically just going to be repeating this process until basically the whole hat is completed. So here we'll do another row. And remember to hold the yarn tight as you're doing this, or else the entire yarn will just unravel. Okay, so now we have wrapped the yarn for another layer, and we're gonna hold this tight, and basically we're going to start the picking process again. So once again, we have the 2 layers of yarn on the loom, and what you're going to do is take your pick again, and once again start with the last peg that you wrapped around, because when you do that one, it's going to hold the yarn in place so it won't unravel. And then just like you did before, you're going to take the pick and pick each individual peg, pulling the bottom over the top until you go around the entire loom again. Great, so now we've picked it around one more time and we have another row done. So what we're gonna do at this point is just continue this exact same process of wrapping the yarn around and pulling the bottom over the top. And you're going to keep doing this until your yarn, your hat is about 8 to 9 inches long. That is the appropriate size for an adult size hat. If you're giving the hat as a gift, I recommend that you stay more towards 9 inches, just to make sure that the hat will be long enough to cover your gift recipient's ears and you don't have to worry about the hat being too short. Great, so now you have continued the knitting process and made the majority of your hat. So at this point, you're almost done. It's just a matter of closing things up and adding the pom-pom to the top. So here again, what we're gonna do is measure to make sure we have a long enough hat. And as you can see, mine is almost 9 inches long, which should be enough for most adults who are going to be wearing this hat. After your hat is as long as you want to make it, what you're going to have to do is cut the yarn so that you can cast off. So how we're going to do that to make sure that we have enough yarn is take the yarn, wrap it around the entire loom. You don't have to worry about going around each peg, just go around the entire loom. And I like to do that about 1.5 times, go around the loom. And that's a lot more yarn that you're going to actually need, but I like to do it just to make sure that I have enough. And I'm going to take the scissors and just cut my yarn at that point. So the next step is we're going to take the end of our yarn and we're going to bring out our handy yarn needle and thread the needle. Now we have the needle threaded and we're ready to cast off. So we're going to start the cast off process in the same place where we started our knitting. So here we have the little nub, and this is going to be the first peg again. Take the needle, take the needle from the bottom and go through this loop here that you have on the peg. So you're going to take it. It can be a little tricky. Okay, so here we have, you can see the needle is going through this loop here, and you're just going to pull it all the way through. And then once it gets to the end, it's just going to, you're just going to pop off this loop. And so now instead of the peg holding this loop, it's the yarn that has this loop on it. You're going to continue that process throughout the entire loom. So again, you're going to take the needle, go from the bottom. Okay, so here we have the needle going through the loop. You're going to pull it all the way through. Until you can just take this loop off and it's just on your yarn. Perfect, so now I have cast off completely and I no longer will need a loom. And right now you can see that the hat is just open like a big cylinder. You can see all the way through it. But in order to finish the hat, obviously you can't wear a hat like that, so you're going to have to close it. And to do it, it's super simple. You're just going to take your yarn that you still have and just pull it shut and just pull that hole together. But before you get all the way closed, remember we still are going to have to put in the pom-pom. So when there's still a little bit of space left, just put this off to the side and you can just leave it there while we complete the pom-pom. So here what we need to do is take the yarn again, a new piece of yarn not attached to the hat or anything, and take our can or whatever object you chose, and you're going to start wrapping around. You push it down. You want to make sure there's a lot of volume. Okay. So you're going to want to wrap enough that it's almost through the entire can. There's no magic number to the amount of times that you're going to want to wrap it. It's just the more times you do, the fuller it's going to be. So now that I have all of this wrapped, I'm going to carefully slide the yarn off the can. It can be a little tricky. And make sure you have your finger inside of the yarn just to make sure that it doesn't completely unravel. So a little pile there. And right now what we're going to do is cut the pom-pom, cut the yarn like this. So we have the pom-pom, you just fold that in, and now we need to cut a second piece of yarn that's going to tie all of this together. So we can cut it on, cut maybe a foot and a half of yarn, take this piece of yarn, put it down, and we're just going to move what the pom-pom yarn that you have and move it so it's right in the middle. Just like that. It's okay if it looks a little messy. It comes together magically at the end. So now what we're going to do is take the two ends of this new piece of yarn that we put down, and we're going to tie them together. And you need to tie this extremely tight because if you don't, the whole pom-pom will fall apart. I like to make a few knots on both sides just to make sure it's very secure. So now what you can do is take the two ends of that string and just put it off to the side. That's what's going to be what you're going to use to actually sew the pom-pom to your hat. And then you can cut this part off as well. Okay, so now it's starting to look a little bit more like a pom-pom. There are all of these loops that's making up the pom-pom. So what we're going to do is cut all of those loops so they're no longer loops, but rather just pieces of yarn that are sticking out to make the pom-pom. So what you can do is just put your scissors right in that loop and just chop. You don't have to worry about making it super precise, just because we will go back later and make sure everything is even and looking good. So now I have cut all of the loops open, so we just have these loose pieces of string. Now it definitely is looking more like a pom-pom, but it still looks a little messy. So at this point, what you're going to do is just give your pom-pom a little haircut. Just go around, and all of the loose ends that are kind of sticking out, you're just gonna wanna chop them off. So now we're done with the pom-pom. So now the next step is to take the hat and sew the pom-pom to the top of it. So here we have our hat, and remember that we closed it just enough so there was a little gap left on the top. So what we can do at this point is take our pom-pom, take our two pieces, two little tails, put it in the hole. Okay, so at this point, I like to pull everything into the inside of the hat. So as you can see, I have turned the hat inside out, and I'm now working in the inside, and I have 3 pieces of yarn. These 2 are the ones from the pom-pom, and this is the yarn that is still attached to our needle. So what I like to do now is tie all of these pieces together. And I like to do that a few times. I just want to make sure everything is secure, not going to fall apart. Okay. And now I'm going to take the part of the yarn that's still attached to the needle and just go around a few times, just to make sure everything is really snug and in place and it's not going to fall apart. So once everything is all tight and pulled together on the inside of the hat, you can just take your pair of scissors and cut any of the loose ends. The last thing that we have to do is just take this original piece of yarn that was the tail left from casting on and just sew it into the hat so it's no longer just hanging off. So now we have our hat all done and ready to go. Congratulations, you just made a hat on a round knitting loom.